Oh, it's me. It's DDP, Diamond Dallas Page.
This is Rachel Ellering, the queen of strong smile.
I'm Eric Bischoff.
Live events, right? When the WWE comes on the holiday tour, when they come to Ireland.
Or Davey Boy without hair braids.
As a fan with braids, as his daughter without braids.
And you
Are watching
WrestleSlam.
WrestleSlam.
WrestleSlam. That's a good thing. Bang!
What's going on? Hi, guys.
Hey, man.
How are you? How's things your direction?
Things are getting better. You know, things are slowly but surely getting better. So, no complaints. How about you guys?
Yeah, things in Ireland are a bit crazy still, but we had a sunny day today, which is unusual. We're so used to rain, you know. It's really unusual. Got a bit of a colour. I'm a bit brown today, which is unusual.
Oh, there you go. It's an Irish tan right there.
Yeah, but Matt, it's an absolute honour to have you on with us. You're a massive star worldwide. We know a lot about you here in Europe, in Ireland. Obviously, Ring of Honor. You've been there for so many years. So we have to go back to basics. Tell us how it all started for you first day. Were you a young fan of wrestling growing up, or was it just one day you decided, right, I'd love to beat the shit out of some guys?
I was a crazy, and still am. I mean, I've been a fan since day one in like my memories. Like I can remember the first time I kind of saw wrestling and instantly was hooked. You know, you go from being like a Ninja Turtles and Thundercats and loving all the like Saturday morning cartoons. And I can remember like my great uncle was staying with us one weekend and he had me like flip the dial over and it was Superstars and like the Ultimate Warrior and all the colors and the Macho Man. And I was like, oh my God, like all my Saturday morning cartoons are real. Like these people are basically like the same kind of larger than life characters, but come to life. And man, I was, you know, like I said, 5-6 years old and I was a fan ever since. I broke every piece of furniture my parents ever purchased. And, you know, they didn't think I'd still probably be in the wrestling world to this day. But, you know, at the time they were desperate for me to kind of get out of the phase of being a diehard wrestling fan. And I never did, you know, all the way to the point to where I ended up just deciding that I wanted this to be my life.
And like, there's no looking back. You've made an incredible name for yourself, and we always say the best is to come. But like, when it comes to Ring of Honor, first of all, and even your stints with New Japan Pro Wrestling, you've always made an impact. You've always made a name. You've always had star-studded matches. What's it like being part of the Ring of Honor brand? Look, you pretty much won everything in that brand. It's huge. We love it. We have an Irish girl called Martina Sesh-Mott. She's looking forward to getting back. She's obviously here in Ireland, I believe, obviously, you know, lockdown, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, what does that brand mean to you, first of all? Because, look, we know how big it is.
Well, you know, I grew up in the Northeast, you know, where WWE, WWF is king. And as I started getting older and the type of guys that I started paying more attention to and the style that I was kind of being drawn to, it led me to Ring of Honor in its early days. And it was just one of those things where I knew, even before I ever was a wrestler, that I wanted to get to Ring of Honor some way. Because, you know, even the guys that I was watching in all these different places, they had all been in Ring of Honor at some point and had made such a name for themselves. And it was kind of like almost like a badge of honor to be, and no pun intended, man, that was cheesy, to like find yourself in that locker room and to be able to hang on those shows, because it was literally the best of the best. Especially of the early days, it was the best of that independent scene, and that independent scene is so, you know, it's hot at different times, but it's very, you know, ravenous. Like those fans in the Northeast are very much like diehard wrestling fans, and they'll tell you if they think you suck. And they've made their voices heard numerous times towards me, but it's just like, if you can handle that kind of like pressure cooker that Ring of Honor was, then you could do anything. So when I first started getting into wrestling in 2008, I definitely had as a goal to make it to Ring of Honor and to make my name there. And then, once I was able to establish that, I've, like I said, always been a wrestling fan. So I'd follow these guys' careers, see that they would go all these different places, all the guys that I looked up to. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to go to Japan. I want to go to Mexico. I want to go to the UK. I want to kind of blend all these styles to make the wrestler that I am today. And, I'm always still trying to build on that and make that bigger. But that was my goal from day one. And I think I've did an all right job doing that so far. Like I said, I have more to go. It's not over yet. I don't want to sound like I've checked them all off, but that was always my goal when I got into wrestling.
Yeah, and we know, as you said, we know how big Ring of Honor is. We've been lucky enough to be there over the years. When we have been able to travel to America, it's massive. We've seen so many stars go on to great, when you look at the likes of Seth Rollins, Adam Cole, Kevin Owens, Matt Taven, there's so many names that are always mentioned. But we have to ask, first of all, there's obviously this forbidden door thing, it's always floating about. And obviously New Japan Pro Wrestling's there. It's kind of a connection with Ring of Honor. Is this something that appeals to you if something came about, to perhaps, work with AEW, work with WWE? Because, look, forbidden door, anything can happen. There's a lot of rumors floating. Your name is always linked to All Elite Wrestling, to WWE, NXT. It's always there, man. It's never going to go away, this link. Is this something that, you might look at in the near future? I know you're happy with Ring of Honor. It's home. But is this something you might possibly look at down the road? Maybe forbidden door route.
It's one of those things where you just never know. Like, from one day to the other, like, this stuff just pops up all the time, and you're kind of finding out like everyone else is, and you're like, oh, I guess that's happening now. So, it's in wrestling, they say never. I would always be open to that. Wrestling is a huge community, and the more you can kind of blend things, the better. The more you can kind of get different eyes on the product, the better, obviously. At the same time, Ring of Honor is in such a great spot right now, just because there's so much talent on the Ring of Honor roster that I really feel like just highlighting our talent alone, I think so many people would find themselves being bigger Ring of Honor fans if they just watch the show top to bottom, because we have such an unbelievable group of talent, and there's so many people still that haven't been able to come over in the UK. The Mark Haskins, Session Moth, obviously, Joe Henry, that we're waiting for them to come over, Slex, Adam Brooks, and it's just like already with those guys not even being able to come over because of lockdown, to see the cards from top to bottom. I mean, Best in the World coming up, I'm sure it's going to be stacked, but if you look at the anniversary show, from top to bottom, it's just one hit after another. So it's very crowded at Ring of Honor right now, even though that, doesn't mean that they would never open the door to any possibilities. But at the same time, we have such a great group of guys that it feels like even if it's just us in the ship by ourselves, we would put on one of the best shows, if not the best show there is. And I was thinking about that last question, how I've been all over the place. One place I haven't been, I've never been to Ireland, ever. So that's something that is still a goal of mine that I need to check off the list.
Martina, OTT Wrestling, it's going to happen. Look, when this restriction lifts, we're going to make sure you're on that first flight over to Ireland. Dublin will look after you. Martina, Seshmat will look after you. We will look after you. It's going to be awesome.
I love that.
Now, I'm going to talk to you quickly about Madison Square Garden in a sec, but Ger has a couple of questions. I know Ger is a big fan as well. So, Ger, fire away, my man.
Well, I wasn't going to ask this, but I'm going to ask it. I know you grew up in a place called Derry in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the city of Derry in Ireland?
Of course. Of course, Derry and Londonderry were named after towns in Ireland, obviously, and Derry's actually where the first potato was grown in the United States.
That's right, yeah.
We brought it over with us. That's I would say well-known fact in Derry, but I don't want to speak for everyone. I hope it's well.
I grew up 15 minutes away from Derry over here, so.
Really?
I was just curious to find out if you knew much about it, or if do you have an Irish connection? Or is your heritage or family?
No, I'm actually not. But growing up kind of in the Boston and New England area, it's very heavy Irish Catholic, and a lot of Irish roots, throughout New England. So I'm very familiar with a lot of my close friends would make their families would make pilgrimages back to Ireland, and I was always jealous. It's like I said, it's some place that I still need to check off the list.
Well, if you do get over, if we're free, we might bring you up to Derry and check that off the bucket list.
I have to. I grew up there, so I got to see where it originated. I got to see the OG.
Brilliant. I'm going to take it back. You mentioned the anniversary show there a while ago, but I want to go back to your Ironman match with Jay Lethal. Such a classic. Everybody always talks about. There hasn't been very many 60-minute Ironman matches in the history of wrestling. Like, so to be involved in something like that must have been an honor, and I'm sure you look back on it fondly.
I would say it's my favorite match of all time, or the match I'm most proud of. And I would say I was probably the most nervous of any match in my career going into that, more than Madison Square Garden or anything. Because like you say, you think about 60-minute matches, they're so few and far between, but also the people that have done 60-minute matches are always legendary people. You think of Flair going out and doing 60 minutes every night, and you're like, holy moly, can I do that? So to be in there and to be going 60 minutes, not just that, but to be in there with Jay Lethal, who I think is, I know people consider him one of the best wrestlers in the world, but I honestly think he's underrated. He doesn't get enough credit because he's just, he's unreal. And to kind of really test myself of hanging with Jay Lethal for 60 minutes. And the other thing is that, Ring of Honor is kind of at a disadvantage of you don't get like a lot of those reps that back in the day on a house show or on a loop where maybe people aren't seeing, the matches, they're not airing everywhere. You'd be able to kind of work with guys and see what it would be like to work a 60-minute match and kind of have that flow. This is the first time you're ever going to see it because everything from Ring of Honor is on the Honor Club. It's out there on pay-per-view. There's not a single thing that is kind of hidden from fans. So it's like you have no practice runs. You got no other kind of feeler outs. This is just going to happen once, and you better make it happen because to me, if I don't hit a home run that night, Madison Square Garden doesn't happen. They just move me right out. Jay's still the champ. So I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I remember it was one of the only times like flying out to Vegas, I was just feeling that pressure on myself, like you got to deliver, you got to make this happen. So I'm very proud of that match from top to bottom. One of my absolute favorites. And if anyone hasn't seen it, it's on YouTube, and I'll hold it up against any 60-minute match. I'll do it. I'll do it. Don't dare me.
Absolutely, it's a classic. Everybody says it's a classic. I'm just curious of the actual psychology of coming up with the spots and booking a match like that. Like it must be for a standard 20-minute match, like you know how to book it out, maybe up to 90 or 100 spots, like, but for 60 minutes it must be time consuming just to plan it out first of all.
Without a doubt. And like you try to almost do it in increments, like, all right, the 10-minute mark, the 20-minute mark, the 30-minute mark will be here. And I got to say, even at the end, a lot of that stuff happened just because we were feeling it. That crowd was going nuts. So a lot of that stuff isn't, planned or anything. It's just feeling it and it happened. And it's one of those rare moments where just magic, kind of happens. And there's a funny story where I think I'm like at like the 15-minute, 20-minute mark. I'm like, oh, we're doing great. And the ref comes in, it's like 7 minutes. And I was like, oh my God, we are dead. We're screwed. So it's definitely a journey, like a planning journey where you're like, okay, I kind of have a mental plan or a mental clock where I usually can nail it. But when you're thinking like, okay, I gotta have to hit it in increments, not in like total amounts. It's like it'll throw you off at first, but like I said, it just kind of things started rolling together, and that last maybe 10 minutes wasn't necessarily what was planned or what was thought ahead of time, and it was just flowed together perfectly. And again, it's probably why it's one of my favorite matches because there's not a lot of back thought to that. It's just we were feeling that crowd in Vegas and running with it.
Brilliant. That's perfect. Sure.
Love it. Now we have to get to Madison Square Garden. I was blessed, honoured to be there in attendance.
Oh, awesome.
And as you know, there was a lot of stuff happening that week, but we were out there doing media stuff, and we said there's no way in hell we are missing this. An incredible night from start to finish. You know, your match stole the show. I'll probably do that from the start, Matt. Tell us, what was it like in Madison Square Garden to make history and, you know, to come up against two great guys as well and do it?
You know, it's funny when you try to explain to people like this life of being a wrestler. It's hard to relate to. And I try to explain Madison Square Garden to people, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. When the sold out Madison Square Garden was chanting, you know, F you Taven, it was the greatest thing to ever happen. I was like, I know that doesn't sound right, but it was awesome. So it's one of those moments that you think about, you know, that 6-year-old kid who's flipping through the dials is watching WWE TV and watching and paying attention to it being in the Boston Garden or Madison Square Garden or being in the Philadelphia Spectrum. And in the back of my head, you know, when I'm wrestling my pillows or my wrestling dummy as a kid, I'm like, in Madison Square Garden. And so to have that kind of like fantasy your entire life, and to be pulling down the belt and looking up at the ceiling of Madison Square Garden, it still feels very much like a movie to me. Like, it still feels like it didn't happen to me. Like, I was there. I remember seeing it through my eyes, but that couldn't have been the case. So it's a moment that I'll forever be thankful for and grateful for. But almost rolling from the last question, that moment, and it's why Vegas is so special to me, because Madison Square Garden really doesn't happen without Vegas. So I kind of, when people bring up Madison Square Garden, my mind instantly goes to 60 Minutes with Jay Lethal, because at that point, I think after the 60 Minutes, it was like I earned Madison Square Garden. And no matter what anyone wants to say about it, I think that if you had been watching from, man, that thing really kind of drew out over 6 months. But if you had been watching the last 6 months of programming of Ring of Honor television, you know, there was only one way for it to end. And so it was an unbelievable moment, and something that I'll always cherish, and something that I'll always be chasing to get back to.
Definitely. And it's fair to say, look, we know it's been a crazy 14, 15 months, pandemics, lockdowns, obviously no crowds being able to attend, you know, limited capacities. You're obviously looking forward to having the fans back in the near future, coming to Ireland, you know, perhaps Ring of Honor doing a European tour. You're looking forward to all that.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and man, this is all kind of related. So like the time before Madison Square Garden, before Vegas, and how I got into that position was because there was a giant kind of groundswell with the Ring of Honor fans who were getting behind me and the Kingdom. And there was this groundswell of fans that thought, you know, I was calling myself the real world champion, and people were agreeing with it. So to not have that fan base that has literally kind of helped me through my career, especially in Baltimore, where I had like my first match in Ring of Honor or the match in Ring of Honor that got me signed, and so many other things have happened for me. But even over the pandemic, you know, I returned from injury. Mike Bennett returns to Ring of Honor. We team up for the first time in 5 years. All that happened without a single fan in the audience. And all those moments are so special, but they would be completely different moments as if that Ring of Honor fan base was all around us. So, man, I have never been so jonesed up for anything. It feels like Christmas is coming this July when Ring of Honor can finally get the Ring of Honor faithful back into the building. And you know, Baltimore has always been so good to us. It's the perfect place to kind of kick things off. Best in the world. I'm just ready. You know, it's a month or so away, and I'm just kind of twiddling my thumbs waiting for it to finally be the day, because it's been far too long without having any fans in the audience.
Most definitely. And last of all, Matt, we have to speak about Mike Bennett. Look, a guy that you know so well. He really looks back to his best, you know, looks extremely happy. You know, the hunger is there. Obviously, you're delighted to see him back.
It's a guy that you're always going to be happy for when he succeeds, because Mike Bennett is just a genuine good guy. You know what I mean? He's just a good guy who was always up for what anyone ever threw at him. He always was up for the challenge. And I think now you're starting to see the Mike Bennett that he's always wanted to present. And last week, you know, we had the title match against the Foundation, and you were kind of seeing glimpses of that Mike Bennett that we've been waiting for. But I honestly think the next couple of months especially, and hopefully after this whole Vincent thing's over, you're going to see a Mike Bennett that's just happy to be wrestling again. The guy's been so good. I've known this guy since I started, and he was always like the guy in the area or in the promotion I was in that like everyone was like, man, that guy's really good. And so I feel like he's never got the credit that he truly deserves. And he's going to take a lot of people by surprise if they you know, sleep on Mike Bennett, because he's got a couple things coming up, I know, from the last tapings that I think are really going to blow some people away.
I love it. Matt, my man, it's been an absolute honour. So we're going to have you over in Ireland in the near future. George is taking to Derry.
Yes, needs to happen.
Seshmont Martina is going to look after us. She's going to make sure everything. You're going to learn the true Irish way with Martina. It's an honour, my man.